This is the story of Valentine Strasser from Sierra Leone, who at the age of 25 found himself as the newly installed leader of a nation of 4 million people and the commander-in-chief of a fractious and impoverished army. He and his cronies seized power in a military coup in 1992, and Strasser ruled for 4 years until he was deposed, as you'd have probably guessed by now, via another coup. How this 25-year-old came to be a head of state is unusual even by the experience of African dictatorships. In this episode of African Biographics, we look at Valentine Strasser's improbable rise to executive power and his sad fall into abject poverty. Valentine Strasser was born on the 26th of April 1967 in Freetown, the capital city of Sierra Leone. Strasser grew up in the neighborhood of Allentown in the extreme east end of Freetown. He completed his secondary education at the Sierra Leone Grammar School in Freetown and graduated in 1985, aged 18. Upon graduating from secondary school in 1985, he enlisted in the Republic of Sierra Leone's military forces, and he was deployed for military training as a cadet officer at the Benguema Military Training Academy in Benguema, a town located just outside Freetown. At this stage, he had probably never imagined that at some point he would become the world's youngest leader. After his training, he was commissioned into the Sierra Leone Army at the young age of 19. Strasser was then posted to military barracks in the eastern part of Sierra Leone. As an army officer, Valentine Strasser was sent to serve in neighboring Liberia as part of a regional peacekeeping mission called ECOMOG. Civil war had broken out there in 1989. And in 1991, ECOMOG was attempting to secure order in the capital of Liberia, Monrovia. You can get more details on this in my Samuel Doe video, which I have linked down below. After 7 months in Liberia, Strasser returned home to Sierra Leone, but the war followed him. In 1991, rebel fighters crossed over from Liberia into the remote eastern part of the country of Sierra Leone. This incursion of as many as 2,000 men, most of whom were on loan from the Liberian warlord Charles Taylor, marked the beginning of Sierra Leone's decade-long conflict. Upon his return from Liberia, Strasser joined a unit that was fighting this rebel incursion that was occurring in the east. However, the conditions for the government troops were wretched, logistical support was poor, supplies of weapons and ammunition were limited, and there was scant medical provision. Aware that they were fighting a war that their political masters would not resource properly, Strasser and other junior officers began plotting a coup. On 29 April 1992, they launched Operation Daybreak, raiding the office of the president in central Freetown, as well as the lavish old presidential lodge off Spur Road in the west end of the city. They found the then president, Joseph Momo, hiding in the bathroom of the lodge wearing a dressing gown. He was then bundled into an army helicopter and taken over the border to Guinea. From this series of events, Valentine Strasser emerged as the public face of the uprising, in part because of his language skills. He spoke English well enough to read out a statement on the radio. As a captain, he was also of a higher rank than his co-conspirators. Some argue too that Strasser got the top post because those around him felt that he could be manipulated easily. And just like that, he became the world's youngest head of state just 3 days after his 25th birthday. In the early days, Captain Strasser's coup was very popular. There were promises of a fresh start for the country. After more than 2 decades of corrupt governments, most people from Sierra Leone welcomed the coup makers, and Strasser was catapulted to messiah status. Print shops churned out calendars embossed with his childlike face. Graffiti artists splashed Freetown with his portrait and those of his fellow junta members. There were grand plans to install a functioning democracy. The soldiers launched a cleanup campaign to rid the streets of mountains of trash, often joining in themselves. The economy was also on the up. Gas and electricity were once again available. Ambulances, which had all but disappeared from Freetown, were imported and put to use again. The new rulers of Sierra Leone called themselves the National Provisional Ruling Council, the NPRC. Strasser was the council's chairman. This inner circle was made up of equally young men, including a vice chairman who was barely 22 years old. For all the jubilation that was occurring after the coup, there was still a war to fight. Out in the bush, the army continued fighting the rebels. During Strasser's administration, the civil war escalated, with the rebels increasing the amount of territory under their control, including lucrative diamond mines, which were the source of the blood diamonds used to fund their activities. There were also disturbing reports of atrocities committed against the civilian population, not only by the rebel forces, but also by some government troops. During this war, civilians were subject to horrific acts of mutilation, including having their limbs, ears, and lips cut off. Incidents of rape and forced labor were widespread, and many civilians were used as unwilling human shields or held in captivity and subjected to repeated acts of sexual violence by the combatants. Forced conscription into the army was pervasive and made many civilians, including children, unwilling participants in the conflict. Meanwhile, back in Freetown, Strasser and his cronies really put on a show. From the outset, their rule was marked with the kind of behaviors that you'd expect from leaders their age. They attended government meetings in sunglasses and sharply cut suits. On one occasion, Strasser addressed a state funeral in the National Cathedral while wearing aviator sunglasses. On another occasion, he turned up to a Commonwealth summit in Cyprus, during which Sierra Leone's return to democracy was a key discussion point. At this summit, he was wearing a t-shirt with these following words written, "Sunny Days in Cyprus." While there, he was reportedly too shy to attend a proposed meeting with Queen Elizabeth. But all in all, life seemed good for Strasser and his friends. This was a rags to riches story, but what would follow after his demise would be a sad riches to rags story. We will touch on this very soon. In January of 1996, just a few weeks before a proposed presidential election, Valentine Strasser went to a routine government meeting that was also attended by his second-in-command, Julius Maada Bio. According to his own retelling of the story, he entered the meeting room without his armed security detail, so there was nothing he could do when Julius Maada Bio drew a gun from under the table and pointed it at him. Strasser was bundled just as his predecessor had been into a helicopter and flown to neighboring Guinea. It is said that what motivated this coup d'etat against Strasser was the fear that he would not transfer power to a civilian government as originally promised. Strasser's successor, who was the leader of this second coup, Julius Maada Bio, is the current president of Sierra Leone. This new leader was still only in his early 30s. But unfortunately, the story of Africa's youngest president does not end here. What would follow for Valentine Strasser after him being deposed from power would be a series of unfortunate events that would lead him to being driven to abject poverty. Immediately after the coup, the United Nations, anxious to get Strasser out of West Africa, arranged for him to study at Warwick University in the United Kingdom, where he was studying law. Unfortunately for him, while in the UK, he was treated with great disdain, though his rule was unremarkable according to African dictators' standards. British newspapers ran scathing headlines calling him the Butcher of Sierra Leone. For reasons unknown, he stopped his studies after a year and went to London, where other Sierra Leoneans hurled abuse at him in nightclubs. Already his wife had left him, and he became a roaming nomad, wandering from place to place in search of solace. He left for the Gambia in the year 2000, only to have his entry to the country denied. That same year, he returned to Sierra Leone and moved back home to live with his mother, where he was reportedly living a rather poor life not expected of a retired leader. It's even tougher considering that he's a former military leader who was at the pinnacle of power and exerting an iron fist. It is believed that his chronicle of multifaceted, unfortunate and stressful events were enough to assault his sanity and to throw him out of mental balance. In January of 2019, he fell gravely ill and was flown to Ghana for treatment. He has not returned to Sierra Leone since then. This has been the story of Valentine Strasser, Africa's youngest president. If you are new here and are interested in similar content, then don't be shy to press the subscribe button and the notifications bell so that you don't miss out on any new uploads. Also, don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.